All right. Hey, look, most people never think about what keeps critical systems running safely until something goes really wrong. Drew from Grace Technology operates in a world where electrical safety, reliability, and innovation aren't optional, they're mission critical. From manufacturing floors to complex industrial systems, the margin of error is razor thin. Today on the Go for Show channel, we sit down with Drew to break down how Grace Technologies is helping companies operate safer, smarter, and more efficiently while building a business that solves real world problems at scale. Drew, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, great. Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate you jumping on this morning.
Awesome, brother. Well, you got a cool setup, man. I told you offline, man. It's I've had so much fun for 5.5 years having people on that have never been on the podcast or never done anything like this, and they're real world guys. I just got off another show that I just did with a gentleman that is his first podcast being on mine, from the steel erector industry, right, of construction, and to see him open up was really cool. So I know we're gonna have fun and share the great things that you're doing at Grace Technologies. So we love to start with, hey, what's a little bit of the background? Were you kind of a corporate guy? Did your family have a business? What area did you come from? Were you in a totally different industry? What's some of that backstory, and we'll go from there. So take it away.
Yeah, so kind of starts around the turn of the century. So my great grandmother, my dad's maternal grandmother's uncle, was Samuel Finley Breese Morse, who invented the telegraph and Morse code. He ended up having no kids, and I just remember as a child kind of getting a book from my great grandmother explaining kind of this family history. And so there's always this running joke in my family. I think Samuel Morse had 6 patents. And so the idea was, oh, my dad has to have 7. I have to have 8. My kids are going to have 9, right? And so there was just kind of always this innovation bug in our mind. And I would be walking around with my dad when I was young, and we would just kind of always play a game of like, well, how do you think this works? Right. And so whether it was an LED light, a motor, some sort of mechanical part on a car, whatever it is, we are always kind of like looking at things and trying to figure out how it works. And I think that kind of like level of curiosity has played really well in my life. Innovation is really kind of the landing point, but the starting point is curiosity. And I've really kind of tried to instill that in my kids as well. And so Dad started this business in 91, actually, as a system integration business. He originally was with Rockwell Automation. And so he had a really great vantage point of the industrial world. And at the time, things weren't called startups. Being an entrepreneur was weird, especially in the Midwest. And he really bootstrapped the business. And he sold off the system integration business and kept the product business, which really started with a innovation project that came from a customer. And that's kind of a key point too, is there are some products that you can imagine that are kind of step change functions, but most of your really, really great ideas come from the practitioners in the field who are looking to solve a problem that they don't know how to solve. And we're always keeping our ears to the ground for those kinds of problems, and really looking for and seeing them as opportunities. And so a engineer at John Deere called up and said, "Hey, I'm really tired of reaching my hand around this bus bar. Can you create a port that goes on the outside of the panel that allows me to connect to my PLC?" PLC is a programmable logic controller. It's the brains of the factory, right? All the computation that happens to automate machinery happens through a PLC. And we have this no-nose policy. And so Dad says, yeah, we'll figure it out. And a week or two later, he delivers a prototype. At the time, the company's name was Grace Engineering and Integration. And the guy calls up a couple of weeks after we deliver the prototype and goes, "Hey, can I get another one of those Grace boards?" And this kind of initial product offering really became kind of like the Kleenex in our world of brands for this type of device. But we knew it was super critical to not just be a one product pony. And in the industrial world, your cost of sales is so high that you want to make sure that when you go into a customer account, even if they're not going to buy one, the initial product offering you have, you want to make sure that you have other things to be able to offer to at least kind of get the ball rolling and
Mm.
started, so that you can start to develop a relationship with them. And industrial processes are always very unique and very different. And sometimes the product that you have isn't the right fit. So it's good to have some diversification in the offering. And so we came out with our permanent electrical safety device line, and that's our biggest product line today. And then we've done some acquisitions as well, and brought some other new products into the market. But every year, so after I became CEO, one of my goals, being a former 3Mer, was I wanted to have a
Mm.
30% MPVI number. So when 3M was really growing and really becoming kind of the dominant company that I think a lot of us, know, they had this incredible product innovation engine, and they were having 30% of their revenues coming from new products developed in the last 2 years. And I really think that if you're a product company, having a MPVI figure that you are marching towards on a yearly basis is super critical. And I think even Elon, I think, has a MPVI number in his head. And we always want to be coming out with new things. We're not too scared of cannibalizing our existing sales. We really want to continue to push the envelope on the offerings. We think that there's tons of space for innovation in the industrial and data center market, and we're excited to kind of be a part of that story. And we wish that other companies would also be as innovative and really start pushing the envelope, because I think that if we want America to reindustrialize, there's not just a silver bullet. It's a lot of innovation that needs to happen across all of companies of all shapes and sizes.
It's so interesting, right? I just had a steel erector, in the construction business on the podcast who's doing data center erection, right? And they're usually one of the first people that are contracted into that process, and then they see everybody else come in, right? The drywall, the windows, the other parts of building a building, and technology wise, right? It's an interesting time because it's still about the human beings understanding, like, hey, what could we come up with, right? What could be innovative? What, like you said, what's challenging the marketplace to be able to do something a little bit different and take it to the next level. So really, really cool. And it's awesome that you had this background, especially even the 3M one. Right? Obviously, you learned so much from your dad, the lineage that you have of innovation and of patents of things in your family. But then you took it, into a corporate sense and learned some of that big company atmosphere, that big company knowledge, and brought it back, it seems like. So did you do your stint at 3M and then basically come back to dad's business and the family business?
Yeah, so I walked. So after I left college, I walked into my dad's office and I said, "Hey, what you've built here is really great, but it's a little too boring for a 20 something." And I promptly left for Hong Kong. So I studied international business marketing at school with a Chinese minor. I only
Wow.
play an engineer at work, not degree engineered by trade, but went to Hong Kong. I did business development for 3M in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan for three and a half years. And then my mom actually ended up getting sick, and so it was kind of time for us to move back. So we moved back, and I took over the international side of our business. And I've been really fortunate to have this opportunity to see industrial companies all across the globe, every type of industrial process you can imagine,
Mm.
everything from the mines and the wells of where stuff is coming out of the ground to the food and beverage packaging lines, where the diapers are made, where automotive assembly, steel. I mean, every type of process you can imagine. I mean, people forget, like, everything you buy is manufactured,
Mhm.
and like there's a factory somewhere cranking something out, right? And so it's been really cool to be able to see how all those different industries operate, and see where they're pushing the envelope, right? One of the interesting things recently for me, as we've gotten a lot more involved in the data center business, has been the companies that are the people at the data centers that really know what they're doing ended up coming from the oil and gas field. And
Hmm.
so data centers are really a power project. Okay. So how much power can I get down to these racks is like really the core kind of defining limitation. And in petrochem, it's very, very similar. It's how do I increase, energy efficiency and be able to create, have more power, creating kind of more oil and gas. And so they usually do that by increasing voltages and increasing size of compressors, pumps, and these kinds of things. And so in the data center realm, they've brought a lot of people from the oil and gas field into data centers because these guys know power. And so it's really cool to see this like cross pollination happening. I'm really bullish on, right now. I mean, there's going to be like $1.5 trillion of capex spend in like the next 2 years on data centers. I think there's going to be an explosion in kind of new technologies, new techniques, expertise developed in America of how we execute these projects at scale. And I'm really interested to see, we kind of have brought industrial tools to the data center. I'm interested to see what goes back from the data center into industry.
Hmm.
And, even the speed of how they build these data centers. I mean, like your steel erector guy, how fast they're doing the projects. This was unheard of a number of years ago. And so it's really, really cool that, hey, now if you want to build a building, it's way more efficient to build these buildings. They've been able to really figure out how to execute these projects perfectly. And so it's a really exciting time, I think, to be in the industrial and data center market in the US. And it's cool to be able to have tangible products that really help people throughout those industries.
It's interesting you say that because we talked about a little strip mall on the corner of some street with, Panda Express and Chipotle and a couple other stores may have, 1,500 tons of steel. And then I said, take that to like 80 or 120,000 tons of steel, but yet within a day or two, it's amazing how it's like it's like Legos. It's amazing how it goes. And I have 0 cents for that. Like I was joking, if you see in the background here, there's a ceiling fan, and I could hardly put that up. I'm very much a people person, finance guy, like strategy. That's my thing. But I have such a heart for those that innovate, those that construct. I even said to my kids the other day, we're driving, from their private school in Naperville, and like, I'm like, hey guys, like, you realize that, you're so lucky you live in an age where we don't even think about food, right? But you talked about it, like somebody somewhere is picking the crops to sourcing it to putting it in a situation where then they develop it, they package it, they food it. It comes to a restaurant, and we're lucky to be in an age that so much innovation has happened. But we got to take a step back too. And like you said, I'm very much America first, and understanding the patriotic sense that we can bring back things here and develop something incredible. So really cool to hear that from you. So look, obviously as a CEO of a company now that's been established for many years, and it's a second generation business, not easy to do in America. You went out to the Asian world where, Japan has companies that are 500, 600 years old. What are some of the things that are holding the glue together for Grace Technologies and the way that you think, and the next step that you've taken in your leadership role for what you do?
Yeah, so I think one of the defining decisions that I made was coming in as CEO. I told my family I wasn't going to do it without a fiduciary board in place.
Mm.
And as a private company, we don't really have to have that.
Hmm.
But I found through the large family businesses that have been super successful and the large private businesses that I know that have been really successful, not just like successful today, but successful for like a long period of time. They usually have a fiduciary board. And there's something about the fact that we're going to run this company in a professional manner. Now we're going to run it professionally, but we're not going to run it bureaucratically, right? And there's a difference there. But it's great to have a board that continues to push me. It's also great to be able to lean on the board and all their expertise, and to just have that level of accountability through the company. I think, one thing I'm a big proponent of is be really clear about what you want. Um, and I think a lot of business people sometimes they think they want something. They think they want some high growth business, or they think they want a lifestyle business, or but they really don't actually know what they want. And so
Mhm.
it's really, really critical as you're kind of early on in this entrepreneurial path. What do I what do I think I want? What do I really want? And being willing to like really go to the wall, like go to bat for that thing. And so for me, it was, you know, hey, we're going to create something really cool in Iowa, and we're going to really push the envelope, and we're going to have incredibly innovative products, and we're going to be a high growth company, and that comes with all sorts of trade offs, right? It comes with a lot less sleep. It comes with a lot more, a lot heavier of a travel schedule. It comes with a lot more risk. It comes with, you know, a lot higher expectations. But that's the game that I want to play, and you know, one of the mindset set shifts I think I've had in the last couple of years is early on as CEO, I would, you know, something would not be going well, and I would get kind of like upset about it or bummed out about it, or you know, kind of let it drag on me. And I noticed I was listening to like a Warren Buffett interview, and also Trump as well has this like incredible say what you will about the man, but like when the shit's hitting the fan, it's like he turns on, you know.
Mhm.
And it's like, so I determined, I'm like, actually when things aren't going well, it's at that moment I get up and play, right? It's like everything else is practice, but when the stuff's not going well, that's when I actually get to compete. And you
Mhm.
know, I think changing that mindset of like, oh, it's this sucks, you know, it's not doing, you know, it's not going well. No, no, like this is our moment to shine. Like time to step up. Like everything else is easy. It's like, okay, now we get to compete. We're in the Super Bowl now. Like let's play it, right? And let's play hard. And so I think that that's kind of a defining thing of entrepreneurship is like, okay, let's take those hard moments. Let's see them as a gift. It's a very stoic kind of philosophy, right? Of like, hey, if it wouldn't be going bad, we wouldn't know. And so that's been impactful in my life of just being able to kind of change that mindset of like, okay, hey, I'm glad that we're getting to see that this is a problem. And often the biggest problems in life are the biggest opportunities. And I know it's cliche, but I really do think it's accurate.
You know, one of the sayings we have at GoFCO is driven by mindset, right? And letting momentum build in, right? Build in that time that you will feel like, hey, I'm about to quit. You know, I've worked so hard. I don't know why things aren't happening. It's like at that moment of two or three more steps that you start to build momentum, and all of a sudden life gets, you know, a lot simpler and easier. It's never super easy, but certainly with the right systems, the right talent, the right people, the right mindset. You know, this could be fun, man. It's businesses doesn't always have to be war. It definitely has a competitive nature to it, and I think you probably played sports too. It seems like you know, I was a D1 soccer player, and like you know that energy that you have in that moment, that time that you have with your comrades on the field, it's hard to duplicate in life. So getting back into a business world where things are going hectic and wrong and you don't know what to do, but stepping up to the plate and being the one that answers the call when people are, you know, pissed off and not knowing what to do. It's a cool feeling, and you want to embrace it. So it's really awesome that you bring that up. So the Grace technology. So earlier, you know, you said something about, hey, like 30% of our innovation needs to be the driver of our revenue side. And I know that you learned a lot from 3M and how they kind of catapulted themselves to be one of the top companies in the world. So tell us a little bit about that function. Like, what's your day to day? What kind of research and development are you guys doing from a perspective of, you know, percentage wise? And then you mentioned travel as a CEO and being the spokesman of the company. You know, are you going to a lot of industry shows? Are you, you know, at you know, thought leadership conferences that you speak at? What's some of those dynamics from R&D to Grace Technologies to your position?
Yeah, so I see that function as kind of three pieces, right? And so you have idea collection and generation, right? So you have your antennas up everywhere. you're constantly looking, you're thinking about problems, you're doing customer innovation sessions, voice of customer. You're walking trade shows, you're getting an idea of, hey, this is kind of new and up and coming. What kind of problems are they going to go run into? So there's this whole massive idea generation, and unfortunately for me, it means a lot of being out in the market. And so being on site with customers, being at trade shows, being at conferences, having conversations, there's a lot of people out there that are way smarter than me. And I want to make sure that I interface with them as frequently as possible. Right. And I've had incredible folks take me under their wing and really teach me about their manufacturing processes. I shout out to Mark Lewandowski at Procter and Gamble, has really taught me a ton about kind of the consumer packaged goods space. Shout out to one of our sales guys, Brian, has taught me a ton about our about the petrochem space. I mean, I've been really fortunate to have a ton of people who are willing to teach me what I don't know. And so there's this idea generation piece. Then there is, what are we going to work on? Right. And so there's a prioritization and productization conversation of, okay, we have all these ideas. What things kind of triangulate? Where is there kind of like the right, convergence of things where it's like, there's a problem, we have some technology, we have a unique insight, we think that there's a way to do something 10x better. And to find that, so maybe you have 100 ideas over here, you kind of whittle this down to like this convergence, and maybe you get 3 ideas that you actually think are really actionable, that you have a unique insight in. And then it's all about the engineering team. And one of the things that we've done at Grace is we have a full stack engineering team in-house. So we can do everything from mechanical design to PCBA, analog, digital, wireless embedded systems, wireless communication protocols, backend cloud, UI, UX, analytics, machine learning, AI. And so we can build a full stack system in-house, which is really, really unique for a company of our size. And that allows for a lot of innovation, because when you kind of vertically integrate that stack, that's where like a lot of the magic happens. And I think, if you look at, Elon's companies, if you look at kind of really the top leaders in the space, there's this huge move years ago to kind of outsource everything. And I think that if you see these companies now that are really innovative, they're really doing a lot more vertical integration. And they want to have a lot more control all the way through the stack. It's taken years for GM and Ford to be able to do over-the-air updating, because there was 60, 75 different controllers throughout their cars, and they were all done by third parties. Well, Elon had one, multiple controllers, but they were all running the same OS. And so he had complete control. And so he was able to create updates on a monthly basis and just kind of improve, Teslas. Well, that was not the case for the big 3. And you look at those iteration cycles that allows you to do. If you have to constantly wait for a third party to act, the iteration cycles are too slow. So you have to be able to kind of have it in-house and run it really, really quickly. We also look for, on our engineering team, we're really looking for creators, builder type people. I prefer generalists with like a slight speciality instead of like a specialist who has a hard time generalizing. Because if you can do more things in a smaller team, smaller network, it just is a lot faster, and those people can just iterate a lot more rapidly. And ultimately, you have to do iteration cycles. If you're not iterating, you try to do some sort of waterfall project, you oftentimes completely miss the mark. And so you need to take those ideas kind of constantly back, take them to the market, check out how do people feel about this? Oh, hey, I really like it, but I think it should be yellow instead of blue. It's too small, it's too big. It has too many features, it has too few features, whatever it is. And so you're constantly kind of refining the idea. And if you're refining that idea, you can get a lot better product market fit. And we want to make sure that when we launch a product, we have a pretty good assurance that we have product market fit early on in that process, because we have a huge channel and a huge network of people throughout the market. If we miss, and I spend a bunch of marketing resources, and the opportunity cost of launching a product that doesn't have good product market fit is
Mm-hmm.
really, really expensive. And so we want to make sure that we de-risk that as much as possible when we get to a full marketing launch.
And this loops me back to something that you said earlier, right? Fiduciary board, sometimes called advisory or board of directors, depending on how big the size of the company. But I'm wondering, at what point did that really solidify some of the direction that you've been able to take from that perspective of, there is a certain amount of resources when you're a small to medium-sized business, and you don't have unlimited enterprise level pocketbooks, or you don't have, I was just learning about SpaceX and the Series A through, like, I don't know what it was, like G or F or whatever they went through and became a trillion-dollar unicorn. Um, what are some of the things that board, along with your expertise, your background with 3M, that allowed you to kind of have that systematized way of doing business that you've been able to develop?
So let me share a story, not about Grace first, and then I'll kind of
Mhm.
bring it back to Grace. So I got sold on the board concept. I was at a Loyola Family Business Institute
Mm.
training in Chicago, and they shared this story about Herb Kohler. From Kohler, makes all the faucets and bathtubs, but also has a massive genset business and super successful Wisconsin-based business, right? And Herb very early on decided he was going to put a fully fiduciary board in place, even though he was like 80 or 90% owner. And he had this idea, and he was like, "Oh, we should build a hotel in Kohler, Wisconsin." And so he went to the board with this idea, and the board said, "Hey, that's a terrible idea." And so he came back the following year, and he was like, "Well, what if we built a hotel with a golf course?" They're like, "Well, why are we in the golf course business?" And then he goes and he signed a deal with the PGA, and it was like, okay, this is going to be, a we're going to have a PGA event here every year. We'll be able to do marketing. And they're like, okay. And they were like, okay, and what about the hotel? And they were like, well, what if it was like a showroom for all of our faucets and kind of water features, et cetera? And eventually it got to the point where it was, a fully packaged idea of what the American Club is today in Wisconsin, which is like
Mm.
this incredible kind of showcase for Kohler. They obviously do all these PGA events. And Cole and Herb said, he goes, the thing was, is that my idea was bad. And it was them pushing me that actually like made the idea what it is today. And so I think our board does a similar thing of where it's like, I come into a board meeting, as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of ideas. Editing is the hard part. And
Hmm.
so I come into the board, and at this point in my career, I can kind of feel it where it's like, I'm not there yet. And I try to like present the concept, the product, the acquisition, whatever it is. And it's like, it, I don't have the insight yet. I'm not there yet. Like the idea is still half baked. And you only realize that when you're talking to like other people. In your head, you can kind of convince yourself that like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. Or oh, I don't need to talk to those customers. I already know this thing, and um, I just I've noticed that okay, now my ideas come in a lot more fully formed. When I'm ready to talk to the board about it, I'm usually a lot closer. And so they'll push me on like, hey, I just don't think that you guys have done enough work on this yet. You haven't thought through all of these angles. Um, you know, they'll send me an article of like, have you considered this? And I hadn't seen it, and it's like, oh well, I've been so head deep in this, I totally missed what's going on. And so this editing kind of function for entrepreneurs, I think is super important. Entrepreneurs are idea people ultimately, right? We have a vision. And so it's very, very easy to go after way too many items. And so focusing and editing and running experiments and following a process is less sexy than, oh, I've got this great idea, let's go. But it's ultimately, I think it really drives business success.
Yeah, you make me chuckle because those of us with ADHD, ideation is probably the easiest thing. Like, oh, that I gotta solve for that. I gotta solve for that problem. I gotta solve for that problem. But yeah, execution, understanding, assessing, putting the right team together, and then like you've said, right, researchers, talent, people that would really execute is always the next level. So
Well, and
awesome, awesome.
I learned this the hard way, by the way.
Yeah.
So early on in my career, my first new product project, complete utter failure. So I had one conversation with a customer, and I was convinced that this customer wanted a new version of our device, one of our devices, and so I spent all sorts of kind of engineering resources, re-engineering the device. I ended up even cutting the tooling, and I hadn't talked to anyone except for this one customer. And I cut the tooling, I go through all the UL certification process. We launched the product to the mass market, complete crickets. And at the time, I think I was like 26, and I just remember I'm like, oh my God, I dropped like $400,000. Like I made a $400,000 mistake, and we're still selling through that inventory. Like, we're selling it, but it's never been great,
Yeah.
and so that scar tissue is really useful in remembering. It's like, just because you think you have a good idea doesn't mean the idea is that great.
No, and let's talk about that, right? Bringing an MVP to market, right, is not easy. So what are some of the ways that you guys have developed and kind of positioned yourself to have better success in that situation? I mean, that was one client, one idea. You went all in, didn't do maybe the research or the back end stuff, or even, have that fiduciary board at that point. What are some of the ways that you kind of have a process to it now?
Low cost, quick prototyping.
Mm.
And so we've really developed some really great engineering muscles that, if we wanted to come out with not an MVP product, but a earlier prototype, we can probably get something pretty much done in a week or two.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
And so that really confines how much resource you're spending on a new idea early on.
Mhm.
So that kind of speed of prototyping really reduces the engineering cost before you know. The second is, and then we're able to take that immediately to customers and show and get, mass amounts of feedback. And, we have, good partnership companies that we're able to kind of go to that are more forward thinking, right? And everyone's on some sort of adoption curve, right? So we want to spend time with those kind of early on in the adoption curve who have an appetite for trying out new products, who are pushing the envelope in some way, because they usually have more insight than someone who is just not running their business that way.
Mm.
And so we'll do multiple kind of iterations of that product to make sure that our idea of a 10x improvement is also their idea of a 10x improvement. And ultimately, then we kind of continue to march it through the process. But if at any point we're just not getting traction, if people aren't interested in it, if our distributors aren't interested in it, if then we can go ahead and pull the plug, and we're never like too much money in, right? And
Mm.
we've saved a lot of money, we've saved a lot of time if we're able to pull that plug early. And also, just because we're pulling the plug early on something doesn't mean it's not useful in the future, right? We really believe in failing forward at Grace. And so sometimes, it's we thought we needed it in this size, but it really needed to be 20% smaller. Well, because of the power supply or the physics of the device, we can't make it smaller.
Mm.
Well, maybe in 5 years, the technology will have changed, developed, and so we know, like, okay, hey, if we're able to get to 20% smaller, that's going to be a home run. But right now it's not.
Interesting, interesting. Give me 1 second here. All right. So look, you mentioned this fiduciary board, and it's so exciting to hear that because in the small to medium-sized business world and the hundreds of people that I've had on the podcast, it is very apparent that, it takes an owner, a founder to get to that, two, 300,000 of revenue. You start getting into half a million, a million in revenue, which, there's only 7 to 9% of companies in the United States, ladies and gentlemen, that even make it to $1 million, 7 figures. Now you're talking 8 figures and 9 figures and multi-billion-dollar companies. It's rare, rare air. But there's reason why enterprise level, right? You hear about the board of directors, and we just brought on Dana White from UFC into healthcare systems. I'm like, what? Or for Meta, right? Well, what does Dana have to do with anything over there? Because it's that mind that they needed, someone that thinks a little bit differently. And Drew's been talking about it on this podcast a lot. So let's go deeper into how you started to select that fiduciary board. Were there contexts in the industry? Did you go outside of the industry to bring in a different perspective and what that meant to Grace Technologies?
I mean, so obviously, first, anyone you choose for your board has to be excellent. I know that seems like stupid to say, but like, you really want someone who like you deeply, deeply respect, and who have all the bona fides that you would expect. And you want someone who has plenty of scar tissue, to be able to share with you. So there's that whole piece. But let's talk about, let's say you have a pool of, incredibly qualified people. You need to look at your business and understand what are the key drivers for your business. Where is your special sauce? What are kind of your unique value propositions, right? And what makes your business super unique? And so, for Grace, right, we have this, we're in the industrial data center world. We go through a very sizable channel organization through distribution. We are in the kind of electrical safety, electrical product space. And so I've looked at, our board of directors is really set up. So I put one of our board directors, he was the senior VP of corporate development and strategy at Rockwell Automation, which is like perfectly in our wheelhouse. He led a lot of M&A as well as a lot of product strategy at Rockwell. So he checked like a lot of boxes. I also wanted to make sure that we had an entrepreneurial voice with a peer company in kind of in our space that we don't compete with, but that they're slightly larger than us. He's been around longer than I have, and so it's good to have that entrepreneurial voice, because sometimes if you only have big company people, they do things in a different way. I also knew that we needed to have a channel voice. And so we have a CEO of one of our large kind of channel groups that actually joined our board. And then we also needed to have a board member who kind of had expertise in finance and HR. And I was able to find her through my YPO network. And so I really thought about, okay, where kind of is the business? Where do I need additional talent? We're also adding a new data center focused board member kind of in our next meeting, which is really exciting. And so when I think about kind of like strategic initiatives, what makes us unique, I want people who have really deep expertise on some of those things. You don't just want a bunch of kind of generalists. You want people who have a specialty in those areas, right? If you're a manufacturing business, which Grace is a manufacturing business, but we're more of a product business, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a manufacturing business, you probably want someone who has really, really deep expertise in automation systems, Kaizen, like those types of, like how do you run a world-class manufacturing operation? You also want someone who's got probably a high level CFO level understanding of a manufacturing operation. If you're running a services business, you probably want someone who has run a sizable service business or has incredibly like high passion about customer service, right?
Hmm.
there's all different types of businesses. And you got to really understand like what makes yours unique and add the expertise from where and add the expertise that aligns with your business's secret sauce.
There's a program at Harvard called OPM that usually when you hit $10 million and above, you get kind of opened up to. And it's interesting, a lot of the connections that you make at those types of, arenas is high level, right? You start seeing how other operators think. You go through tons of case studies. You start to develop different ways to do business. And what a cool thing, right? Because, you had your experience at 3M. You saw that big enterprise level scenario because you're like, Dad, this is kind of boring here. Like, I want to go big time, right? But then you came back. You came back to that family owned business and you've really innovated and become something truly that it's going to last a third, a fourth, a fifth generation, assuming you don't sell to a competitor or a strategic partner or what have you. So, what's really interesting is, you know, your part of the business, manufacturing, innovation, revenue cycles. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys really, bring in revenue, right? So you've got clients, and obviously that was an established scenario once you got into the business, and your dad did a great job. But what were some of the things when you, like you said, you kind of blew $400,000? That was a learning experience, an ouch moment. But recovering from that, like, all right, well, hey, you've developed a product. Do you go to shows and then you start to get purchase orders? How is it that you bring in real revenue into the business?
Yeah, so we do. We obviously do trade shows. I think with our products, they're very physical in nature, so people love to kind of touch and feel and see things
Mm.
like live. As much as I hate doing trade shows, it's not my favorite thing, but I do love actually seeing a lot of customers all in a short period of time. So
Hmm.
I do a lot of trade shows. We do a lot of active lead generation campaigns, and then we work a lot with our channel partners, and so our distributors and our reps are out in the field all the time, and our distributors, have active buying relationships with pretty much every Fortune 2000 industrial that you can imagine, right? And so any sort of intro we can get from our distributor channels. So we have like 600 active distributors in North America, like 1,500 locations,
Mm.
right? And each of those locations is going to have between 3 and 30, outside salespeople. So, and they're going to each have, 25 to 50 accounts, right? And so you start kind of running that math. And so it's about kind of targeting them, right? And so there's online lead generation, there's physical trade shows and conferences, there's channel customer acquisition, let's call it. And then, we move that into setting up proposals, setting up meetings and presentations. And we do a lot of sample programs and demonstration stuff. We do pilot programs, really to kind of get customers to get their feet wet. We typically see about, an 8-month sales cycle, which is
Mm.
really critical in our business. Is like if you don't understand that, you're never really skating to where the puck's going to be, right? So you have to be out ahead of, you really got to watch your leading indicators, because if you start failing today, you're not going to know you failed for 8 months, right?
Hmm.
And at that point, then by the time you figure out you failed, you're another 8 months away from being able to kind of regrow the business, right? Because you can't, if it's an 8 month sales cycle, well, now I've got to restart a different kind of technique or strategy or whatever. So easily you could be 16, if you start screwing up today and you're not watching your leading indicators, you could be 16 months, 18 months away from being able to rectify that cycle, right? I mean, that's a really big miss. And so I pay a lot of attention to leads coming in, number of meetings set, deals created, deal values. Are we moving those things through the funnel? Because I have to pay so much attention to those leading indicators, otherwise it'll sink the business. Um, let's see what else. What was the other part of your question there?
Well, the engagement, right? So you get that potential client, right? let's set aside the current clientele that you've had and, rely and trust in you. But let's go through that new acquisition model. So you meet someone at the show, they like some of the innovative things that they're seeing, they physically, engage with you. What does that process look like for their journey to be able then to do they put a deposit down? Do you work on 50%, retainer, et cetera? Like what does that revenue cycle look like?
No, we're pretty easy to do business with. So after a trade show, let's say, we'll have our business development folks, our internal business development folks, go ahead, give them a call. We'll set up a presentation. We'll really kind of vet them, vet the opportunity, discuss the applications, understand if the product's a good fit. We have 4 different product lines that we design, manufacture, and distribute. And so there's different needs for different product lines depending on the kind of people that we're talking about. So a mechanical reliability guy isn't as interested in our electrical products.
Mm,
A controls engineer isn't as interested in our wearable voltage detection device. So there's all sorts of different. There's kind of we try to match the right product with the right kind of persona, if you will. But we put them into a sequence. We use HubSpot. I think running a regimented CRM follow through process is really critical, and we automate a lot of that process without trying to without losing the human touch. So we get them
mm,
on the meeting. We vet them. If we think it's a good fit, we'll arrange some product samples to be brought over as well as an on-site demo. They'll usually end up piloting, the product in some way, and they usually they'll just purchase the pilot through our distribution partners. And then we're working, our golden ticket is if we can get on the specification. So we're always angling for the specification. And when you get on the specification, then you can start working on retrofits and any new equipment that they have coming into the facility. And so we're always trying to document those specifications. And really what I'm doing is by getting on that specification, I'm buying an annuity.
mm,
Right. And so we put a
mhm.
lot of effort into getting that specification, getting that work going, and then keeping those customers happy. And we run on some of our product lines that are a little bit more customer success driven afterwards. So like our wearable proxy bands, as well as our IoT offerings are a bit more like, let's make sure that the customer is getting value out of, the software, the platform after the purchase, and really kind of lead them by the hand. Whereas other of our products are really kind of more installed devices that get used by electricians, and usually they get installed and like we never hear about it again, and everyone's happy,
Mm.
which is great. Like we don't if they're happy, it would be great to get some case studies, but ultimately it just doesn't take as much of a customer success process on the back end as some of our other product lines.
Do any of the product lines or business units have some sort of ARR or MRR component to it, or are they mostly just a one and done, with obviously volume and hopefully proceeding with long-term relationship?
2 of our product lines have ARR.
Okay.
And so our IoT predictive maintenance offering, so we have wireless
Mm,
sensors that go on rotating equipment, and we're able to predict failures before bearings fail or other mechanical faults occur. And then we also have ARR cloud platform with our proxy bands, which allow a health and safety manager to be able to monitor all their electricians out in the field and know if they're coming into close contact with voltage, so that you can
mm,
kind of you can bucketize people into a few different groups of risk, and then you're able to hey, you guys are getting a lot of alerts. Maybe we need to make sure that you guys have more training or more PPE, or we're going to do more frequent ride alongs, that kind of thing. And so those products with the ARR tend to be more of the customer success driven platforms.
And it's interesting. You mentioned distribution channels, right? And other companies that have their sales guys out there representing your product line. So, do you team up with the Ulines or the Grangers of the world, or is that off? Or are you, do you also go specifically direct, or do you always want to go through that other channel?
We don't do much work with Uline. We're more Granger's definitely a distributor for us.
Mm,
We've got large national partners, like Wesco, Rexel,
mm,
Sonopar, but we also work with a lot of regional distributors as well. We have very little of our business that goes direct, except
mm.
to a few very kind of large electrical OEM manufacturers. So we really push almost everything through the channel, which we like because we get paid. So it's really nice. We don't have any bad debts, and so going through distribution, I think a lot of startup founders shy away from distribution and they want to do a lot of business direct. But
Mhm.
I think in the industrial space, it's very very hard to execute that. And I would highly recommend to folks who founders looking to kind of start in the industrial space, you should definitely do your homework on the channel. It's going to be very very hard to scale. I mean, there's a lot of large companies that they literally can't buy stuff from people unless it goes through distribution. There's integrated supply contracts. So we like to be able to serve that, but really going through a channel is a different type of machine that you need to know how to operate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, every industry's got a little bit different component of how they go to market and what their supply chain looks like, right? And I would assume a lot of innovation is happening. A lot of constraints happened that were visible and kind of shown to reveal themselves through the pandemic and some of those situations that happened. And I know that a lot of industries and from my commercial banker hat dealing with that emerging middle market type companies, that innovation of understanding, okay, hey, where do we find, blockage? Where were some of the bottlenecks that happened in our supply chain, and how did we, pivot to a different way? So, really, really cool stuff. So, I guess what would you say is that next 18 months look like for Grace and what you're looking to do? You obviously are ahead of the curve, it seems like, with social media and putting yourself out there as the CEO, the figurehead of the company. But where do you see Grace Technologies, 6, 12, 18 months from now?
Yeah, so we have a big product launch coming out in the fall. I'm going to keep a little tight-lipped on that, but
Yeah.
that will drive a lot of our NPVI growth over the next couple of years. Um, that being said, we're actually in an interesting place from an engineering team perspective. We have launched a lot of new products over the last kind of 18 months, and so the engineering team's been really really busy. And we're looking forward to actually having a little bit of creative white space. So we've been working, it felt like we had a backlog of things that we were trying to execute on. And that's good, that's healthy, but like occasionally you just need to be able to take a moment and really have a broader view of like what's going on and like, okay, what if we took a little bit longer here? Like what ideas do we need to actually take a little bit longer, let them ferment a little bit, let them kind of get a little bit of legs, go through a couple extra iteration cycles. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I think we're obviously really focused on the data center space. We're not going to lose the core identity of our industrial business, but the data center space is a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think, for a lot of companies, including ours. And so we're making sure that we serve those customers really really well. Electrical safety and electrical reliability in a data center is absolutely paramount. There's more power going into a single data center hall than most cities use, right? And so the electrical safety risk is massive in data centers, and so we think we have really good product market fit there. We're also, we're pushing the envelope on AI utilization within the business, and kind of bottom up, top down. Everyone is quickly experimenting on all the AI tools, building their own apps, and really building kind of the technology stack of the future here at Grace. We're also opening up a sales and engineering office down in Austin. And so that, there's just a few things going on, just a few things, John.
Just a
Yeah.
couple little things, trying to stay, local,
Yeah.
trying to stay small, right? So,
Yeah.
awesome.
Our international business has been growing really, really well. I've got a great team internationally. And that's always a ball of fun to figure out kind of what the next things are going to be that pop up internationally, because it's always stuff I don't expect.
Are you still pretty Asian centric? Have you gone to South America? Is there any area of the world that you've kind of, had better contacts or better innovation and growth into?
We're really active in Australia, Latin and South America, and Europe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we do some stuff still in Asia, but I think South America and Europe are really our major growth markets
So just out
outside
of
the U.S.
curiosity, this question popped in my head, because, the Asian market tends to be a bit of a copy and steal market, right? In some ways. Have you found that you have to be even more strategic, even more kind of not cloak and dagger, but I guess something to that way that you don't give away too much, you're very legally protected or something that would keep you from not, losing the IP side of things.
The Asian market isn't highly sophisticated when it comes to electrical safety or
Mhm.
safety in general. So, for the most part, except for large U.S. end users over in Asia, or folks who are making equipment for American customers, they don't really understand why anyone would use our products. so,
Wow.
right now, I don't feel too much IP challenge over in Asia, but maybe that changes at some point. But right now, I think they just, why would you install a device? You don't need to. And so we haven't had to deal with that too much, which we're fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a rabbit hole we can go on that route too. So, well, awesome stuff, man. Look, I think we could talk probably 2 or 3 hours. Really seems like such an innovative company. Second generation. I'm super excited for you guys because the more we keep these family-owned businesses going, 50, 100, 200 years, it really keeps the infrastructure of the U.S. and what this country is all about, right? Entrepreneurship, founders, CEOs, the fiduciary board concept, and in practice of putting it into your small business, medium-sized business, and growing to an enterprise level. So, the way we end our podcast are CEO, right? So C is for client experience, and would love just kind of the value proposition, 60 seconds or so of, what does it mean to do business with Grace Technologies, with Drew, with your team? What does that, client experience look like?
Yeah, so we're all about accelerating the world's transition to zero harm, zero downtime, right? And so we're going to be able to come in and really give you practical, innovative solutions that help keep your people safe and your equipment running well. And so we've got an incredibly knowledgeable kind of staff that can help you walk through all the electrical safety ins and outs, as well as your electrical reliability, mechanical reliability, and really improve the quality of your safety programs as well as your reliability programs across your company. We have incredible distribution partners, and we're available. We have this easy to do business with thing, and we'd love to. If you guys need help, we'd love to work with you.
Awesome, brother. Well, this next question is about Drew, right? About you. So it's about engagement, right? So I've had 300, 400, CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs on, and we talk about this question being something that, how do you like to engage? Are you, like to go to a game, with your family? Do you like to do dinners with your clients? Are you a show guy? Like, do you like to go to a concert? What are some of the ways that people can take from this and see how does Drew engage with the people that you do business and family and et cetera?
I mean, D, all the above. I also love to do adventure trips though. So,
Okay.
uh, recently came back from the Salkantay trek to Machu Picchu,
Oh,
and
wow.
so there's something about being in misery with your friends, walking a bunch and just kind of sore and tired at the end of the day that leads to great bonding. But I love to cook. And if you guys are in Iowa, hit us up. Like, would love to get together, make a meal at my house, have a quiet night. But yeah, I love to do kind of trips. I do love festivals and shows. I'm really happy that the new Noah Khan album came out, so I've been listening to that the last week. I've listened probably already 5 times to that whole album. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. Big plug for Noah. But yeah, I enjoy all kind of all the things. But I've been also trying recently. I want to, instead of doing traditional meetings, I prefer going on, like, having a meeting over a walk.
Mm, okay.
And so I think that that's a kind of a powerful way to do meetings, and I think it actually leads to a lot more creativity.
Interesting. I've been hearing that a lot on LinkedIn. These videos that they've been coming out with now recently, and these shorts. For some reason, that's always been popping into my feed of just people taking walks, different ways, different. Not so much behind the desk anymore. Evolving, right? Different ways to bring someone out. I think they call it experiential, right? How do you get someone, a CEO, a founder, to not just do something traditionally, but experience something and then have an attachment to your company, to your brand, and to the things that you do to build relationships and business. So awesome stuff.
Bart Foster at Business Outside over in Boulder literally wrote the book on it.
Oh, okay.
And so highly recommend. He's a good friend of mine, a fellow YPO member. Really fantastic guy. And his life story is super interesting, and kind of he's been able to unlock a lot just by doing business outside.
Well, I mean, I'd love to have him on the show, brother. So you're gonna have to give me a plug to get him on, on this small little Go for CO podcast. So, love to do that. So last one is of CEO, right? Operational excellence, and you've talked about it. Your company is it, right? And using operational excellence and having systems and operations and ways to do things. But can you give us two or three tools or things that you guys have developed that internally have helped you become more operationally excellent?
I mean, I think there's an entire set of AI. I mean, at this point, it's not about a singular tool that you can use. It's about creating exactly the tool that you want to use.
Hmm.
And everyone today has the ability to be able to do that. And so I would highly recommend that if you're not actively coding in Claude or Codex or one of these, if you can dream of what you want to see, for the most part, you should be able to make it happen. We obviously are a huge proponent of HubSpot in our CRM, and that really helps us stay operationally excellent. We also run a relatively tight cadence on meetings. We don't do a full EOS type operational system, but we do a modified version of that. And just having a really clear structure of, okay, this is what we do quarterly, this is what we do monthly, this is what we do weekly, this is what we do daily, I think really helps that out. We also do reviews on a quarterly basis, which, if you're doing reviews on a yearly basis, I just don't know why you would even bother. So it's like quarterly just seems to be, you can keep the conversation. It's a lot quicker. And you're not like trying to remember back 12 months of like what's going on.
Mhm.
And so I think it's a couple of those pieces. And again, using AI to even help you build, like, you can build your own review platform to make it look exactly the way that you want to look. You can use, you can use the Claude connectors to be able to pull in the data sets so that people don't have to report on their KPIs. That's already in their review when you log in. So you can actually have a detailed conversation about the important topics, instead of like, oh, well, this is that, and going through the numbers. But really being data driven and AI first, I think is critical.
No, that's huge, and people are trying to figure it out, right? It's there's a lot of fear mongering, right, per se, and I think installed fear to maybe some people taking advantage of companies or people in certain ways, but then others are putting the vision, the light, and seeing, understanding, like, hey, this is how you could truly use it, and you're just one of them right now, just sharing kind of how you've been able to implement it within Grace and letting your team be a part of that innovation too, which is so cool to hear that a lot of your guys and gals are taking their own ownership of it and doing it, sometimes on company time, and some will take it off company time to be able to perfect their craft and be better. So really cool
Yeah,
times that we're living in.
AI AI is not going to take anyone's job, but a person who's using AI would take your job if you're not using AI.
For dang sure.
100%. So I would become an expert.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's time. It's been time, and certainly one of the things that we look at, even just in my podcast, some of the workflow automation, some things that I work with in the emerging middle market space, and food distribution, metal fabrication, these types of companies. I've been urging my, founders and CEO clients of mine as a commercial banker to really take a step back, take a look at it, and see what team can really help you do some things that would help you. So. Awesome, brother. Any best way to get a hold of you, to connect with Grace Technologies, an info email, or just a website, whatever way that you feel might be best for them to connect with you guys?
Yeah, my email is drewa@gracetechnologies.com. And also Drew Allen on LinkedIn. I think my handle is actually Allen-Drew if you like LinkedIn.com/Allen-Drew. But look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me, send me a message. We'd love to know what you guys kind of thought, or if you have any tips, tricks, or ideas for me, or you got product ideas, we'd love to work with you.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, Go Show channel. Many of you come to the channel, learn from great guys like Drew, second generation CEO, founder, entrepreneurs, and you don't subscribe to the channel. So become a subscriber of the channel. Check out my book, The 4A Formula, Untangle Any Challenge and Think Like a CEO. It's available on Amazon, soon to be on audio. It's already on Kindle. And we're excited about some of the things that we're doing with the 4A Boardroom, the 4A Leadership newsletter on LinkedIn, and some of the great innovative things that we'll keep on bringing you and some awesome people like Drew onto the show. So thanks, Drew, for being a part of the show.
Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate the opportunity.